Yo, what's up, y'all? It's Cone back here again tonight with another episode of After the Buzzer. There are only 5 NBA games tonight, so to be honest, there's not a lot to talk about, but there are a couple big things that I do want to touch on, a little bit from each matchup. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and start with the biggest story of the night. I'm a Thunder fan, and so we're going to get right into Russell Westbrook praise. Russ has had a rough start to his Lakers career. It's been kind of hard for him to adjust, playing alongside such a ball-dominant players such as LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And I've made a video in the past talking about how I thought it would work, especially how I thought Russ and AD could really help each other out. And a lot of that showed tonight in their win over the Spurs, winning 125 to 121 in overtime. LeBron sat out in this game, and so it was a big test for Russell Westbrook. A lot of times in the past when the Lakers have been in this like LeBron AD era, when LeBron misses time, the Lakers really struggle to create shots. They don't have any playmaking, and that's part of why Russ was brought in. LeBron is older. He's going to have to miss some time at some point, whether he's resting, whether he's nursing an injury. His ankle was bothering him going into this game. LeBron is probably going to miss some time, and so is Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis seems to miss time every season, so someone like Russ comes in and kind of helps to stabilize, gives them that third option, gives them a guy that can help step up and win them games if those two or one of the two isn't able to play. And that really showed tonight with that Russ putting up 33, 10 and 8 in 40 minutes. He shot efficiently. He kept the turnovers down. Russ was doing Russ things. He was hitting clutch buckets. He was hitting a lot of tough layups in the paint. He was grabbing offensive rebounds. He did what he needed to do to win this game. And that's huge for this Lakers team that's been struggling to find their footing early. Losing this game, they would have been 1-3, which is obviously 2-2 still isn't the start that maybe they wanted, but it sounds a lot better than 1-3. And to lose to a team like the Spurs, which I personally think aren't a great team, they're very competitive, and I am going to talk about the Spurs in a second, but Russ really showed a lot of what I think he can be for this team. A facilitator, a playmaker, a guy that can go get you a bucket and attack the rim when you need him to. I think the Lakers are still trying to figure this thing out, but this was a glimpse of what they can be if they do figure things out. Russ with 33, 10 and 8, he was facilitating, he was scoring, he was doing everything he had to do, and Anthony Davis was also a big part of that. 35, 17 and 4. They make for a good duo. A lot of what I talked about is how they can be lethal in the pick and roll, in the pick and pop, lethal in Russ attacking the basket, AD playing the center position, which he did play a good bit tonight, with Dwight Howard only playing 18 minutes and DeAndre Jordan only playing 16. Anthony Davis had some center minutes, and I think that's when him and Russ are going to be most effective, is when AD is playing the center, helping to stretch the floor, keeping the paint open for Russ to drive, to kick, do what Russ typically does. When he, LeBron, and AD figured this thing out, they're going to be really good. Tonight, Russ was in more of his typical role. Like I said, he was attacking, he was handling the ball, and a lot of times, Frank Vogel hasn't done a good job so far of staggering Russ and LeBron's minutes. They don't need to be on the court together that often. Russ can be the guy that plays alongside, whether it's just AD or the bench unit. He can just play alongside guys and be that playmaker. If LeBron's on the court, it's kind of hard for him because then either Russ or LeBron James are a spot-up shooter. That's not what they're good at. Or LeBron can do a little bit. He's shooting like 50% from three on the season, but it's not his strong suit. It's not what he typically does. So you need to stagger the minutes better. Even tonight, still, I don't understand why Russ and Rajon Rondo are sharing minutes pretty much ever. Russ should be playing alongside like Malik Monk, Kent Bazemore, guys like that, guys who are going to take shots. He can be alongside like Trevor Ariza when he comes back, alongside maybe like an Avery Bradley. Austin Reeves has given them good minutes. I think he should continue to be a rotation guy going forward. He's someone that Russ can play alongside. Give Russ these shooters. Wayne Ellington when he comes back. Play him with AD at the center position and have LeBron be a playmaker in another unit. And then when you get to crunch time, you can have them all on the court together as your best talent. There should be not a lot of minutes in the middle where they're on the court at the same time. You've got to stagger it. And I think this game showed greatly how productive that can be. If Russ is the sole playmaker on the court, he can be effective. He can do what he needs to do. And that benefits him, that benefits his teammates, and in situations where the Lakers have LeBron James on the court, it's going to benefit LeBron too because he is best when there are shooters around him. Russ isn't a shooter. As a big Russ fan, I'm going to tell you Russ is not a shooter. That's not his strong suit at all. And so it's diminishing the strengths of the two of them if you pair them on the court all the time. they should be together in closing minutes. They should start together. You shouldn't bench one of them. There were some people saying you should bench Russell Westbrook after his bad first few games. Don't overreact to bad performances to start the season. The season just started, and I'm already seeing people talk about how guys are frauds. Gilgeous-Alexander was subject to some of those fraud tweets, which doesn't make any sense. He had a 30-point game tonight. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But Russ and LeBron, you got to stagger the minutes, and I think once they figure out how to play together, this will be a lot more of the result. You'll see these big stat lines from Russ, AD, LeBron all together, and I think the Lakers will become a lot more effective as the season goes on. But I thought this game was a great example of what they can be. With the Spurs, also, I'm sure a lot of national media are going to say, oh, the Lakers are better without LeBron. I know that's going to be something like Skip Bayless or something talks about. Please don't listen to that. But on the Spurs side of things, DeJounte Murray. He is super underrated. I said this last season. I think it was the game right after the All-Star break when Shea dropped 42 and Lou Dort hit the game winner. DeJounte Murray, that game was against the Spurs. DeJounte Murray was fantastic in that game. And in my recap of that game, I talked about how good he was. I talked about how I thought he was one of the most underrated young players in the league. And I still think that's the case. 21, 12, 15, clutch block on a jumper late in this game to help them send it to overtime. He was phenomenal tonight. And he was a big part of why the Spurs, even without LeBron James, the Lakers are still a good team. And the Spurs were able to push them to overtime because of the efforts of DeJounte Murray, who just continues to he made some tough buckets at the end of the fourth quarter to get them into overtime. He's just a great player. And I think he's someone that's not talked about enough because he does play in San Antonio. He doesn't play the flashiest game. He's still an all NBA caliber defender. I like DeJounte Murray a lot, and I just feel like he doesn't get enough recognition. Another guy who doesn't get enough recognition is Jakob Poeltl. He had 27 and 14. He was great tonight. He's got to hit his free throws. That was a big problem with him tonight. I think he shot like 0 for 6. I don't think he made a single free throw tonight, and a lot of those were in clutch time. They were fouling him because they're like, he's not going to make his free throws. And so Jakob Poeltl, he's got to be better in that regard, but he was phenomenal. He had a really good game tonight outside of those free throws. Devin Vassell with 19, Lonnie Walker with 21. The Spurs were fun. They're a fun young team. They've got some young talent. They're going to be okay in the future. Right now, it just wasn't enough tonight, but they are a young core that I don't think people talk about enough, and they do deserve some more discussion. Next, the Knicks-Sixers game. The Sixers have problems. Their biggest problem is they don't have creation. Obviously, a lot of that typically comes from Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons creates for his teammates, and he puts a lot of pressure on defenses with his drives to the rim to get his teammates looks. Without Ben Simmons, they're really struggling. They also don't have Shake Milton, who is one of their better bench scorers. Maybe he could sometimes start. Tyrese Maxey struggled tonight. He's been having a good start to his season, but it wasn't his night. And Joel Embiid only had 14, 6, and 3. Embiid is dealing with some problems. He keeps talking about his knee. He's saying he's trying to push through it. I'm worried that he's going to get injured. I don't want him to push it too far because that's a terrifying thought if they lose Embiid for the season or even just lose him for a little bit of time. Without Ben Simmons, their margin for error becomes a lot thinner. And with a guy like Joel Embiid, who is injury prone at times, who does take a lot of big bumps and really plays a physical brand of basketball, you worry about him getting injured, and that could completely derail the Sixers season entirely. This Ben Simmons situation, whether he comes back or they trade him, even if there aren't rumors right now, the physical manifestations of what's going on are showing up on the court. You're seeing the inability to create shots. They don't have a bench point guard. They lost George Hill over the offseason. Tyrese Maxey is starting for them. He would typically be their bench point guard, but as a starting point guard, he kind of still struggles to create for others at times. Tobias Harris had 9 assists tonight, so he kind of tried to pick up some of the efforts, but you need a legit point guard. Whether you trade Ben for one or you get Ben back, they've got to figure that situation out quick because the East is good. Like a team like the Knicks, who are now 3-1, are playing really, really well. The additions to their team are really improving them. You see the Bulls that are 4-0. Teams that typically you don't see at the top of the East, they're rising up. The Knicks, of course, 4 seed last season, added some more talent. They're better. The Bulls, who have been bad for the past few seasons, are getting better. The Hornets, we've seen, have a really great start to the season. You can't afford to lose these games early. They've got to figure the situation out quick because otherwise the on-court product is going to suffer. So those are my thoughts on the Sixers. They've got to be a little bit better. In the case of the Knicks, RJ Barrett is playing fantastic defense on pretty much whoever he guards at this point. But what really shined in this game for me, also shout Julius Randle, Evan Fournier, Kemba Walker, Derrick Rose. Those are all guys that I named that scored in double digits. That's not something we typically saw from the Knicks last season. They have a plethora of guys that can go out and get them double-digit points on any given night now. That was the biggest problem with the Knicks, especially what we saw in the playoffs against the Hawks. They could not create shots. Julius Randle was struggling greatly. He was in a big slump. They were locking him down because outside of him, it was like Derrick Rose. And then nobody else could create their own shot. RJ's been getting better at it. Julius Randle, he was an all-NBA caliber player last year. If he doesn't get locked up in the playoffs again, he can create his own shot. Fournier with 18. Kemba Walker had his best game of the season with 19 points. 13 for Derrick Rose. Emmanuel Quickley with 8. Obi Toppin with 9. Alec Burks with 8. It was such a well-rounded scoring effort, and that's not something we would typically see from the Knicks. The amount of guys that could break into double digits, all those guys I just named could score double digits on almost any given night. That's a huge plus for a Knicks team that already is great defensively. If they're able to get that production from guys, this team goes from like pretty good to really good really quickly. I like this Knicks team a lot, and I think they are showing a lot of what they needed to improve on. They made good acquisitions. It's so weird to talk about the Knicks in a positive light still, especially in terms of offseason acquisitions, after such a long time where they just kept giving guys money for no reason. They saw their issues, they went out in the offseason, addressed those issues, and it's paying dividends on the court. So shout out to the Knicks front office. Thunder Warriors game. I won't talk about this too much because I talked about the Thunder a lot the other day. Shai dropped 30 though. He is phenomenal. There were people on Twitter that were looking at this video of his jump shot saying, oh, it's broken. Oh, they broke Shai's jump shot. He's a fraud, whatever. 30, 4 or 5 from 3, hitting some crazy contested shots. His ability to create separation, especially in the mid-range, is ridiculous. He can get pretty much whatever shot he wants in that area. He's so crafty, whether he stops on a dime, whether he steps back, whether he just steps around defenders for a scoop layup. He's mastered this like sidestep 3 as well that he's been working on a lot. His offensive game continues to improve, and he was already phenomenal last season. If he keeps this up, it's going to be hard to keep him out of the All-Star game. Lou Dort played some phenomenal defense on Steph Curry, who did end up having 23 points, but it was on, I believe, 6 of 14 shooting, and most of those points came when Lou Dort was off the court. He had one stretch in the first quarter where he hit like 2 threes. The second, Dort checked out, and then Dort immediately checks back in because we can't have that if we're trying to win the game. So shout out to him. JRE, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, if you don't know, Thunder second round pick, started at center for the first time tonight, and he was good. Giddey had 7, 9, and 4. Not a great shooting night from him, but a lot of other things worked really well. Good night from all those guys. I liked what I saw from Poku as well in his 18 minutes with 9 points. He had this crazy like behind the back step back 3 in the corner over Andre Iguodala, which Andre Iguodala is the Finals MVP, so I'm going to take that win. The Thunder ended up losing, but all in all, against a great team like the Warriors who are still undefeated, this was a great effort. This is what I want to see. Competitive, and even if we lose, the young guys show out. Like I said, Curry had 23, so it was an okay game from him. Not what we typically see from Steph Curry, but still a solid performance. 20 from Damian Lee, who was really the killer down the stretch. It felt like every time the Thunder brought the deficit back to single digits, Damian Lee would hit a 3. Same with Andrew Wiggins, who had 21, 4, and 4. This Warriors team's really good. I've talked about in the past. You know they're good, they're undefeated, and they are for a reason. In the Nuggets-Jazz game, what I really want to say about this is shout out to Jokic. He got hurt in this game. He bumped knees. He tried to come back in and play, but of course they said, no, hell no, we're not risking that in a game that they were losing. He's okay. He had a knee contusion and he was just questionable to return, so it wasn't a huge thing. Thankfully, he's all right. It was scary seeing him bump knees, but in just 15 minutes in the first half, 24, 6, and 5, he was on his way to another like MVP level performance, which he's continued to do over the course of this early season. Monte Morris did have 19. He stepped up in a big way after Jokic went out. Michael Porter Jr., a guy that a lot of people thought was going to have a pretty good season, has just not quite been up to the level that we've expected him to be in Jamal Murray's absence. A lot of people thought the Nuggets would be okay, at least for a little bit without Jamal Murray, because Michael Porter Jr., he was phenomenal offensively last season. He had the potential to step it up even more. He's not quite there yet. Only 13 points in this game. He's got to be better if they want to be the team that they possibly can be. It's just going to be up to him. He is the guy that is going to determine where they end up in the standings when and if Jamal Murray comes back and when they head into the playoffs. On the Jazz side of the ball, Rudy Gobert with 23 and 16. He's been a monster in the early season. 15 for Mike Conley, 15 for Bogdanovich, 13 for Ingles, 19 for Clarkson, 10 for Hassan Whiteside. All-around scoring effort from everyone to beat the Nuggets pretty handily once Jokic went out at the half. And finally, Rockets versus Mavericks. Not much to say about this. 26, 14, and 7 from Luka Doncic, 16 and 2 from Tim Hardaway, 16 from Reggie Bullock, offseason acquisition. On the Rockets side of the ball, you had 16 and 17 from Christian Wood. Really, the big thing is Kevin Porter Jr. has to be a little bit better for them in terms of being their playmaker. He's getting assists, and that is, of course, what you want from your playmaker. The problem is it's coming with a lot of turnovers. He's averaging right around, when I checked Basketball Reference before this video, it was around 5.3 assists per game. I'm not sure if that includes this game where he had 8 assists, but also over 6 turnovers a game. You can't be averaging 6 turnovers a game as your team's lead ball handler. He had 6 turnovers again tonight, I believe. He's got to be better on that end. He has to be better as a facilitator if he is going to be their point guard going forward. It's early in the season. He's still young. He's still figuring out the role. So I'm not saying it's some dire circumstance. It's just something I noticed and wanted to bring up from this game. Those are my thoughts on the games. Let me know what your takeaways were from the games tonight. I appreciate y'all watching. I will see you all later. Real One Say Back.